I want to talk momentarily about another early event, and that is kind of the core thread of this. The story of a man and why he wants to go home. It's phrased pretty directly in Book 5, where Calypso has been informed that she has to free her little boy toy and let him, after many years, return home. She is not wild about this. She has a nice little objection to the god Hermes, who's the messenger god, bringing it down from Olympus. And she says, you know, all the male gods get to keep, however many human girl toys that they want. But if one of us female goddesses gets herself a little something, something on the side, we're just castigated. Interesting little feminist note there, I have to say, and hardly alone within this text. But this is the ruling from Olympus. This is a, this is a very strict hierarchical power structure. So she knows she has no choice but to do it. She's going to do it grumbling a little, but she's going to do it. And she goes to Odysseus and frames it for him in somewhat unflattering terms, like around line 202. The goddess queen began, "Odysseus, son of Laertes, blessed by Zeus, your plans are always changing. Do you really want to go back to that home you love so much? Well then, goodbye. But if you understood how glutted you will be with suffering before you reach home, you would stay here with me and be immortal, though you might still wish to see that wife you always pined for. And anyway, I know my body is better than hers. I am taller too. Mortals can never rival the immortals in beauty." She is a goddess. She will never die. She will never age. Their life there seems pretty idyllic. There's no work to be done. All the food is just, growing on trees. You just walk around, you pluck a piece of fruit off, and you have yourself a nice little nosh. Everything is idyllic. If Odysseus stays there, he will live as a god and also never grow old and never die. Why would he want to leave? And we learn throughout the course of the poem that, the home he's going back to, Ithaca, is not all that great. It's kind of a crap hole. The earth is kind of rocky, so you can't grow very much there. It's a bit hard scrabble. Why would he want to go back? Odysseus answers with a counter-argument. So Odysseus, with tact, said, "Do not be enraged with me, great goddess. You are quite right. I know my modest wife Penelope could never match your beauty. She is a human. You are deathless, ageless. But even so, I want to go back home, and every day I hope that day will come. If some god strikes me on the wine-dark sea, I will endure it. By now I am used to suffering. I have gone through so much at sea and in the war. Let this come too." On a level of character, we're getting a sense of, okay, he's sort of playing her a little bit. He is very diplomatic. And he starts off in the diplomatic mode of agreeing with her. Yes, you're right. You are smoking hot. And my wife is getting up there. So he concedes that, starts on a diplomatic note to build a bridge between them. He knows he is in a vulnerable position, and she is dangling his one great goal in front of him. He has to play this very delicately. But he introduces also that mentality of the whole society of men and day by incorporating in his argument the counter argument by saying, yes, I know I'm going to go back and my wife's going to be older and I am going to start getting older and it's going to be kind of rough. It's not going to be as soft and cushy and lovely as here. Argument, counter argument. But even so, he comes to a resolution. You can call it thesis, antithesis, synthesis. I want to go home. That's his goal throughout the whole poem. Said right in the beginning of this first scene with him. I want to go home. We have been following this poem for quite a while at this point. This is book 5. Because of what we know about his character. Can any of that speech be taken as sincere? Since we know that at the very beginning of that little speech, he is making a kind of diplomatic, well, of course, goddess, you are the most beautiful, and my wife is going to be an old hag any day now. Of course, you are right about this. If he is thinking in that strategic and somewhat calculating and insincere way from the start, can we take any of it to be sincere? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe he just needs to work his way through and use the deception as a shield, but underneath that, the true expression, the sincerity, can't help bubble up. You can only hold back so much through the power of your own mind. We're all given to emotional outbursts from time to time. Probably nobody in this room. But you can think things through and know that, okay, this is the right way to go about something, but then, I just can't resist. Maybe that's what's going on here. We don't know. Where is this falling? Is he truthful? Is he deceptive? We don't know. Now, the whole poem will be an exploration of those moments when he is being deceptive and you're wondering, well, can any of this be taken as sincere? So you want to posit that question, that conflict right at the start, and then lead people through it. You don't want to answer it right away. And in fact, the poem never really answers it, because he goes back and forth a number of times and there's no way to really lock it down and say, okay, the guy started out as a jerk. He went through a lot of conflicts and events where he learned that he was being a jerk, and in the end, he's going to be a nice guy, and everybody's going to walk out of the theater happy because that's a good Hollywood ending. But this doesn't do that. This keeps you uncertain. So that, 3,000 years later, we can still be talking about it. Look at that line also. I am used to suffering. That's sort of a play on his name and his epithet. Epithet is the adjective essentially that always is always associated with his character, the man of many turns, polytropon. But also the name Odysseus is the man who, well, there's some debate on this, but for the most part, the name means the one who is hated, or, and again, notice the flip, there's always an or, the man who hates, or is angry, or is just a pain in the ass. All of those are roughly decent translations. But is Odysseus angry with the world, or is the world angry with Odysseus? Certainly, it seems like everybody is angry with him, or at least, all the gods. Fate itself has it in for him, and he feels like he's all alone in the world, which, let's face it, for the majority of this poem, he is. Which again, dramatically works, because who among us has not felt like, the world just has it in for me, I can't catch a break. Sometimes that's self-pity. But that doesn't mean it's not a true perception from time to time. And it's a very human one. When you're looking out at the world and you don't understand how it works and it's just overwhelming you. Following that, the resignation, let this come too. It's a declaration of defiance, in a way, saying, sure, this latest turn of fate, this opportunity I've been waiting for, I've been excited before and been smacked down. Maybe this is just another instance of that. Even so, I want to go home, so I will take my shot. And if it turns out not to be the dream that I want, my homecoming, well, I'll endure it. Let this come too. Which is, in a way, heroic. Admirable. He is defining himself as an individual willing to stand up to the powers of the universe. But of course, there's always a but. The individual in opposition to the universe is another way of saying the individual in opposition to society, mankind writ large. Again, the oppositions. After this little scene, again, you look at beginnings and endings. You look at how something starts and how it ends. And this little scene on the beach where she comes to him and he declares that I want to go home to my wife. I want to leave you, Calypso. I'm bored here. Honestly, even if, you go to the nicest resort in the world, let's face it, you get bored after a little while. There's only so many daiquiris you can have poolside before it's just a little bit boring. But here he says, I'm leaving you. I'm going back to my wife. And that feels like a decision has been made, right? And what is the very next action described in the poem? The sun went down and brought the darkness on. They went inside the hollow cave and took the pleasure of their love held close together. Yeah. I love my wife. I'm so in love with her. I'm willing to risk everything to get back to her and have an awful old age and decrepitude and die just so I can get away from you, Calypso. Hard cut to, hey, baby, let's go back to the cave. Now, Always the contrast, always the extra fold, always the turning back from one to the other. One issue I have, quite frankly, with this translation, which is excellent translation, Emily Wilson, there is a line missing in this. And she habitually leaves it out throughout for very good reasons of making it accessible and a little less archaic. But that is, you see those squiggles up there? Can anyone read that? Us effat! Of course. Oh, yeah, well, sorry about my penmanship. Us effat! That phrase pops up an awful lot throughout Homer. Also, variations, hos photo, and a couple of others. You don't really need to know that. But what it means is, and what it is generally translated as, is so he said, or so she said. And it comes at the end of speeches. Now, if you think about it, this is an oral poem. This is being, recited, sung at festivals. And when you have long speeches of characters talking, unless you're going to do a funny voice for one of them, it's very hard to tell when that speech begins and ends. So you get these long introductions that say, and, the mighty hero took a deep breath and held forth in front of everybody and said, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, at the end, you get blah, 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 blah. So he said. And that just puts a button on it. That sticks the landing. That doesn't appear in all of the speeches. Some of them just end and you're left to kind of linger. But when they do appear, it tends to be on a note of finality, of something concrete. Just think, so he said. It has that kind of weight to it that you find in, let's say, the opening lines of Genesis, and it was good. So he said. It's authoritative, it's anchored down, it is testimonial. It's not open-ended, it's not, you know exactly where it ends. There's something final and concrete about it. And that comes after this speech where he says, even so, I want to go home. Us effat. So on that simple level of narrative, of the telling of the story, not the story itself, but the telling of the story, narratological critique. It is telling you something. These little hints mean something. And granted, that is not in this translation, so I don't expect anybody to pick up on it, and I certainly don't expect anybody to say, hey, wait a minute, she missed a line. Because, I think there are like 14,000 lines in this poem. You can't be expected to know all of them by heart. But these little choices that the poem makes are significant. These little choices add up to a whole lot of meaning that is very easy to skim past.